All right, welcome to the first video edition of Life Stinks with Mark Dad. Today we're going to be talking about my favorite album of all time, The Heartbreakers, Like a Motherfucker. Album has made such an impression on me. My first and only car, the personalized license plate I had was L.A.M.F. First tattoo I ever got. When I was the day I turned 18, I got L.A.M.F. Told my mother it stood for Let's Make Friends. Told my dad what it stood for, and he was like, "You're gonna regret that." Funny thing, when I met Walter Lure and I proudly showed him my faded, crappy L.A.M.F. tattoo, he's like, "Don't you regret that?" I'm like, "Hell no." So basically, my first exposure to the Heartbreakers was the punk rock movie from England. I got it on a VHS cassette from Farm Fresh grocery store in Richmond, Virginia, and it had the Sex Pistols, the Clash, Subway Sect, but it had the it had Eater too, but it had the Heartbreakers most importantly, because that was truly one of the best things I've ever seen. I can remember putting it in the VCR and just seeing them play Born to Lose or Born to Loose and seeing Chinese Rocks and just be like, my God. And I had never I'd heard of the New York Dolls, and but I certainly never heard them, like like everything I read, they were just like a crappy Stones ripoff. But the Heartbreakers video blew my mind. And the way they're on stage, Walter Lure was in the middle, so I just assumed that because it said Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers, I thought oh, the guy in the middle, it's Johnny Thunders. So for a year before I saw any New York Dolls videos, I just assumed that was him. It's out, the Heartbreakers started in 75. It was Jerry Nolan from the Dolls, Thunders from the Dolls too, and Richard Hell. They played as a trio for I want to say 3 or 4 shows. Some of this is on this record. I mean, it's historically accurate. If you want to hear how they sounded, I mean, it's okay, but so they played, a few shows. They got Walter Lure from a band called the Demons, which weren't that good. And then they became one of the greatest bands in history. All right, so the Heartbreakers started in 75. Richard Hell, Jerry Nolan, Thunders. They played on the, if you want to hear them, then it's great. It's a good addition to your Heartbreakers collection. I guarantee you won't be busting it out all the time. But, they played a few shows like that. Walter Lure joined. They played like that for a little, few months. Richard Hell trying to take over the band. That's not going to happen. Kick him out. They get Billy Rath, who was a fantastic bass player, so good. The whole record's so good. So they start playing, selling out shows like Max's, everywhere in New York, and they can't get a record deal. Because who wants to sign junkies? I mean, because they could die, after you give them, I don't know what the Heartbreakers record deal was, but business sense is maybe you could have done something like, we'll give you this much money because you could die tomorrow, you know. They went, signed with Track Records, which is, you know, hilarious. It was run by the Who managers. What were they? They were Chris Stamp and Kit Lambert. They actually are, I don't think they're on this one, but it was also produced by Speedy King. And want to guess how he got his name? Because he liked to do coke. And so the deal with Track Records was started in '67 by the Who managers, the guys I just mentioned. They signed Hendrix, obviously the Who, Crazy World of Arthur Brown, check it out. And they had not released an album since 1975. And like the Heartbreakers were gonna be their like comeback album. Conspiracy is that they were signed as a tax write-off because they weren't technically signed to Track Records. They were signed to the Chris Stamp Band. And their manager, the Heartbreakers manager, Lee Black Childress, he was smart enough in their contract, like if the Chris Lee Stamp Band Limited folds, we get our tapes back, you know. And even though the Track Records was sending, like, billing them for drugs, like they kept them totally supplied with drugs, but they would bill it to their studio time. Like, I mean, that's pretty much documented, you know. I bet that won't show up in the Track Records documentary, you know. They ended up going bankrupt. Surprise, because the theory was that, you know, they were just, the Heartbreakers were a tax write-off. Ended up going bankrupt. Track Records is broken, you know, locked up. And so their manager, Lee Black Childress, I hope I'm saying that right, Childress, but him and some of the guys broke into the vaults of the studio, and he's from what I remember, he's on his phone with his lawyer being like, oh, what can I take? And he said he's just like looking at all these like unreleased Hendrix tapes, unreleased Who tapes. He's like, oh my God, I just want to take them, you know? But they just took the Heartbreakers tapes because he's like, otherwise you're going to go to jail probably for a long time. But they got the Heartbreakers tapes. Say that the song Baby Talk has a lot in common with this song, I Ain't Done You No Wrong. Like, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. Live album doesn't have Jerry Nolan on it, but it's still pretty good. There's a lot of mistakes on it, but they left them on there on purpose because they said it's how our band sounds. So for L.A.M.F, there were 300 mixes of this song, this album. That's 12, if my math is correct, that's 12 mixes per song. Right. People might have noticed it wrong. Anyway, there's 12 songs, there are 300 plus mixes on it. So it just seems like, holy crap, they were letting everybody mix it, like, unbelievable. And the thing is about this this mix is like, oh, it's muddy and everybody hates it. And apparently, when I was a kid, and by kid I mean 19, an adult, they released the Heartbreakers Lost Mixes, and I believe it's stuck in my wife's fucking car. It's great, and it sounds awesome, but like the new thing is, and I almost feel that it's like propaganda, not propaganda, but like I feel that it's people making me pay for this album over and over again, because it's an audience like, oh, you hate everything but you like this, but you like, how many times will you buy this album over and over again? Apparently a lot over the years. But they just put out a box set of it, like 4 CDs of like the same songs. Like, come on. Jerry Nolan, drummer. If you don't fix the mix, I quit. He was super pissed about the New York Dolls, the albums, the way they were mixed, which again, I think sound fantastic. I don't get it. So they were released around the time that L.A.M.F was supposed to be released. I'm quitting the band if we don't fix the mix. There's no time. Track Record said it's going to be released October 3rd, 1977. Jerry Nolan quits. Album comes out. They play some shows with Sex Pistols drummer Paul Cook. Like, you know, he ain't no Jerry Nolan. Nobody's Jerry Nolan. Like, you look at Jerry Nolan at his prime, like, holy, it is awesome. But didn't want to do it. Apparently he was moody, and maybe being on drugs affect your like your thought process. But gets back to they beg him to get back as a paid musician, and he does all these interviews, and he's like, yeah, I just work here. Like, not exactly, that's not a quote, but he made it clear that I'm a hired musician. These guys can't find anybody else. I'm doing them a favor. They're paying me a lot of money to do it, you know. The Heartbreakers are officially broken up May 1978. That's no time. No time. It is unbelievable to me. Right before they broke up, they recorded a couple demos. London Boys, which is making fun of the Sex Pistols. It's a great song. And Too Much Junkie Business, which is just a rewrite of the Doll song doing Pills by Diddley. So EMI passed, Virgin Records passed, RCA passed. Because, you know, who wants to sign people that could be dead, you know? I highly recommend reading this book. One of the best rock and roll experience, like fanboy experiences I ever had was meeting Walter Lure after a show in Portland. Hung out, talked to him about fucking rock and roll and like every guitar nerd shit you could think of. It was funny. He was like talking shit to a bunch of like, well, a couple like people that were like punk as fuck, you know? And he's like, tell me, Great Swami, tell me about punk rock. And it's like Walter Lure telling them, you know? But one of the questions I asked him was, what are you prouder of? Like a Motherfucker? Or, I don't know if it's Rent Party. And he told me this one, and it's because he said that he was in charge of it, and he didn't have to like bow down to anybody, you know. But when asked, he said, what would a second Heartbreakers album sounded like? And he said pretty much So Alone by Thunders. And I this is an overrated album. Like, I don't care what anybody says. I like it and enjoy it. It's super overrated. Like, I'd rather listen to this than this. Like, and obviously, this one wins out of all of them. But come on. All right, so I think that's it.